Alright, I just wanted to do a quick video overview of tool maintenance, basically, because it came up in the last video that you need a properly sharpened tool. So this is my basic setup. With these tools, I believe you can take even the shittiest Home Depot axe, and I'll show you one I got over here. This axe here, for example. You will be able to take an axe like this for $15 and make it into an excellent piece of equipment that is razor sharp, just like that. Oops, not focusing. There we go. You want that in an axe like this. I'll get to these axes and stuff in a second, but for now I'm just focusing on the sharpening itself. What you'll need is a file. One of these two will work, basically. This is a Baco file. You can get it for like 10 bucks on Amazon. It's very good. If you don't want to use Amazon, you can just use this. It is a Nicholson file. They used to be made in America, but they're made in Mexico now. But both of these are what you want. What you want is two sides. See what I'm saying here? Oh, maybe it won't focus. Anyway, these are just farm files. What I have here is a Japanese whetstone. This is well worn, so you can see the groove in it. I'll explain how this works in a bit. Optional, if you can get one of these dry hones. They're ceramic. They're not exactly whetstones. I'll show you how to use them. One of these is also optional, and you might need a leather belt as a strap. And also it helps to keep a glass of water nearby you can dip this into. And additionally, you're going to want something to sharpen this over, because of the way this whetstone works. It's very dirty, and it gets a lot of mud everywhere, and I'll show you that. Okay, now we have to talk about the actual tool itself and the philosophy of what we're going for here. So what I have here is a good example. It's a double-bitted axe. It has two sides. Now, you're not necessarily supposed to sharpen both sides to the same sharpness. You're supposed to keep one fine side and one rougher side for getting into the muck and dirt that you don't really care if it gets chipped or damaged. And that's what this is. It's the only dull axe I have right now, so I'm going to sharpen this up to standards just to show you what to do, but normally you wouldn't want to do that. I want to see if I can show you this, if it's going to zoom in enough or focus enough. You can see the rough mark. You can hear it. You can hear, it's really hard to focus. Let's see. Trying to show you the edge of an axe. It's not really going to work, but you can see how dull it is, basically. I hope you can see how dull it is. Like, I can rub my finger along that all day. It's not going to cut. Not going to cut, because it's not meant for that. This axe came rougher than it is now. I've already used the file on this, so I'm not going to do it, but I'm going to show you basically what you want to do and how an axe is going to come. So when your axe comes out of the box, or when you pick it up in the store, if you're not paying $100, $200 for it, it's normally going to come with a pretty rough edge. Like, they're just going to kind of grind it on in the factory, and sorry if I just blew your earballs out with that one, sorry. They just kind of grind it down in the factory on some belts, some rough belts, get it to an approximate shape with the expectation that you're going to know what you're doing, so you're going to put the edge you want on your axe for whatever job you want. What you want to do to get the axe sharpened to basically my style, however you want to call that, is now you take your file, take the double hatched side, and what you want to do is just kind of find that angle. It's hard to explain. Find that angle where it's not running straight down, so it's not taking off too much metal from the very edge, but it's kind of forming this bend. What you want is not a straight... Oh shit, I can't show you this with one hand. You don't want an angle. You don't want like a straight angle coming to the point of an axe blade. What you want is a kind of curve to that point. You want a nice roundish, kind of rounded off edge. That makes the blade a whole lot stronger, and I'll show you that later. But basically what you want to try and do is take your file, grab it from both ends. Do this with two hands. I've already done it on this axe, so I'm not going to really need to do it. But just kind of run it forward and down. Run it forward and down. Just keep doing that. You want to get quite a firm grip on it too. Make sure this axe is really secured and firm, and just kind of go at it. You'll be surprised at how much metal this file can really remove in a pretty short time. And you want to just do that to both sides. Get it to a point where I'm showing you it's at now. And that will be rough enough. Now the real work begins. So now we're going to move to the actual whetstone. And it's pretty simple. What you're going to do is basically get yourself in a comfortable position and just move that axe blade along the whetstone. One. Two. Three. I usually go all the way up to 10, switch it over to the other side. Same thing. And you're just trying to grind down any bald spots there are on the axe. Alright, so you want to make sure, another thing is to do an even amount of passes on each side. So I did about 20, or I usually go in 10 sets. So 1, 2, 3, all the way to 10. Switch it around, do the same thing over there. 20, 30, 40. So I do about 40. Look how dirty it gets. This is why you want something. Look how much of this kind of clay stuff builds up. Ew! So I've just gone over to the sink and kind of washed off that muck so we can get a good look at the blade. When I dried it off with the towel, it kind of took off little fibers. That's an interesting indicator. You can use that. Pay attention to that, because that tells you something about this blade. Let's see if it'll focus. Come on. It just won't do it today. Anyway, what that tells you is that there are burrs on the blade that are either bent one way or the other, and they are hooking and ripping out these fibers as I pass over the front of the blade. See, that's something to keep in mind when you're sharpening. So we want to see where we're at after those 40 passes. We can see there's a significant amount of polishing going on here. Let's see, it's hard. It's easier to see if you use the light, actually. You can see that area of polish that started to develop. Significantly smoother. And on the other side, it's a little less even up here. So when I go back and do another 40, I want to make sure I'm hitting this side of this edge of the blade a lot more. Looking at the face of the blade itself, though, we've run into a problem. It's way duller. There's a huge bald spot here. And I just don't know if the camera is going to pick it up. It's just going to be very hard to see, but you can kind of see it's kind of flattened here. You can see that? I could put my thumb down as hard as I want. It's not going to cut because it's totally fucking flat. When you run into that, that just means you just gotta go back in there, do another 40 or 50 passes, and be way more aggressive. You want to kind of perhaps even angle the whetstone as you're moving it back and forth even a little more aggressive along that edge, just to kind of get a flat, or trying to get a point going. And then it's just going to be hard work, but it's just what you have to do with these factory blades. Bring back the material even further on both sides and bring that point to a sharpness that we want. So just get back in there. So I've given this about 40 or 80 passes. I honestly don't remember, because you kind of put on the TV and just work while you're watching something. And I think that's ideal. But we can see kind of the more polished surface here a little more. Let's see if I can do it with the light again. See that? Remember all those file markings in the very beginning? Those are all basically gone right towards the edge. And we've also gotten rid of that bald spot for the most part. It's still pretty rough, but it's there. And I also wanted to show you what I was talking about earlier, but I don't think I got it across too well. When I was talking about blade geometry, how you want to bring a blade to a point, there's multiple ways to do it. This is how most people conventionally think of sharpness, but it's actually not the kind of sharpness you want for an axe. This is basically good for knives, and that's what this knife is. It comes to a sharp point. This is called, you can see it very well actually in this particular knife, which is why I chose it. Let's see, can you see how it comes to that very angular, flat point? That's called a Scandinavian grind, basically. It's really good in a knife application because with that geometry, you can get a very sharp blade going. The narrower the geometry, the sharper the blade, obviously. And that's why straight razors are the way they are. They go up so far and so narrow is because they need to be that extreme level of sharpness. But obviously you can't have that in an axe because that is not very good at resisting impacts. This knife is not designed to take the kind of impacts an axe is. So when I'm talking about a rounded blade, this is what I mean. You want it to kind of come to a nice rounded edge, and the more you polish that surface, the more you get it to a nice roundness. It'll still have quite a bit of sharpness, but it'll be way more impact resistant. It might not be able to shave hairs off. And also when I'm talking about sort of the burrs that are taking fibers off of the cloth, this is what I mean. It's kind of an accentuated version of it, but what you have is some of that metal is actually smearing up and over the blade and creating sort of this hook, and that is catching fibers and ripping them out. So another thing I didn't think I quite made clear with the whole bald spots in the blade, I've had some esoteric drawings here to help, is you'll run your hand along the blade of the axe and you'll find this bald spot here. This is what it looks like. It's just flat. It's not coming up to a sharp point. So with the rest of the axe, you're kind of doing this kind of very low angle back and forth. And there's also a sort of tilt back and forth organically that just comes from your wrist and the movement of the axe in your other wrist. That's good. You want that because it helps bring about this organic sort of rounded pattern. I found that when you use machines and tools, you end up with something more like this. It's not what you want. So what we do is we come at it from a far more aggressive angle. We kind of try and remove that wobble, and we take off all of that material as much as possible. And then we just kind of resume and start again with the normal movement of the blade. So now we're basically done with the very, very rough grit side of this thing. You'll see it's quite a bit more worn than the other side. The reason is you get way more aggressive with it. You don't need to baby it, and you wear this divot down in the middle. I find this divot, as it sort of develops in the whetstone, actually helps to bring about that smooth, rounded edge even more, actually. So it's almost like the whetstone matures. Now, though, we move on. We move on to the 1000 grit side, which is a lot finer, and you want to go at this with a little more finesse. Now, see what I mean? You're using a lot more control, trying to make sure it contacts every part of the main blade, making sure that this surface runs over the very tip and sharpens it all pretty evenly. You're going to need to do this just as much as you're going to need to do the rough side, because it's such a fine grit, it takes a lot longer to remove that material. So let's get to that. Alright, so after I've taken that fine side to the axe head, we can see it's a lot sharper. Well, I can feel it at least. You feel a finer edge. There's still a bit of a bald spot here. I don't know what to say about that. I mean, it's also on the other side. I just can't seem to get rid of it no matter how much I sharpen it. It might have something to do with the shape of the axe itself, but it doesn't really matter that much for this particular axe. And we can see now that it will cut. So we're making some big progress. We're pretty much done with this stone. Now what we want to do is move on to this dry hone. And I'm going to show you how to use this. It's a bit of a different procedure and a bit of a different philosophy. So with this dry hone, the idea is less about taking material away and more about actually just you're kind of smearing the metal into a very smooth, very polished thing. It's not really removing a lot. It's a very I don't even know if you can measure the grit on this. Probably like 7,000 if it's anything. And also this whetstone or hone is very old, so it's even more polished. See what you're doing there? I like to use a circular motion. It helps polish a lot better. Now, if you can get your hands on one of these, I don't even know if they sell them anymore, but something similar, the process is going to be the same. You're basically just smearing, trying to polish that metal as much as possible. And this is just something you're going to have to acquire and learn for yourself, but when you very first start with a very fine dry hone, you're going to feel it. You're going to feel all the little, and you're also going to see a little bit of the powder that kind of gets wiped off of the hone by those burrs I was talking about earlier. They're actually scraping into the dry hone. You can feel and hear it scraping. But as time goes on, this takes a lot longer than the other process, by the way. You might have to sit here for a couple hours, just go in that circle. It's a lot easier to do because it's a lot lighter. It's not full of water. It's not so big. It's not as loud. And eventually, you'll reach a state where this is barely making any noise as it slides across this polished surface, and it's not giving you much resistance at all. And you can just kind of feel that, and then you know you're ready to move on to the even finer side and put the very finishing touches on it. I'll show you that when I get there. So maybe after just about 30 minutes of that polishing, we've gotten rid of the burrs substantially. I could try and wipe it down with a rag and see if it's still catching anything, but I don't feel it. Usually you can just feel it with your fingers, actually. I don't feel anything with the rag either. It doesn't look like anything. So you see how much more polished that is. That's almost to a mirror polish. It doesn't really show up that well on the camera. That's what you want. You want that mirror polish to start to show up. And this thing cuts, well, now, like barely any weight being put down on it. Yep, there you go. So, I guess you didn't need the belt. The belt is here as a strop, just in case the polishing doesn't work. It doesn't work on some steels, but in this particular steel, it seemed to work really well at getting rid of those burrs and just smearing out that polish to be perfect. What you would do is kind of take some of the gunk at the bottom of this cup that builds up from this whetstone and smear it on the belt. Put your foot down here. Just smear it on the leather. You want a real leather belt, by the way. And then you just, what you do is you just run it along the blade kind of as a stropping mechanism. I'm not very good at stropping. It's kind of its own special skill, but there you go. So thanks for watching. I hope you found that a little informative. Sharpening is an art I didn't quite understand when I was getting into it. Like the upfront costs kind of shocked me a little. Buying all the files and all the fucking whetstones and the dry hones and the strops and all that stuff, and actually just doing it by hand. But it's very satisfying once you actually do get that blade. And like I said, this is the first hatchet I ever worked on. And this thing is still razor sharp after years of use. And this thing only cost me $15. Altogether, all of this stuff together was less than $100, less than $80. I've did some other things. I stripped the paint job off of this. That's a different task. There's a whole bunch of other stuff that goes into axemanship I'd be willing to show you guys if you're interested. Let me know if you're interested in a video about handles, about wood grain alignment and what to look for there, and I don't know, other stuff than that.